The wheelchair felt foreign beneath me as I rolled into the small, dimly lit diner. My hands gripped the wheels, every movement calculated. I had spent weeks preparing for this. To the world, I was Damien Cole, a billionaire CEO with a reputation for ruthless business acumen. But here I was just another man in need of kindness, someone society often overlooked. Then I saw her. She stood behind the counter, wiping her hands on a faded apron. Her golden brown hair was pulled into a messy bun, and dark circles lined her eyes, betraying exhaustion. Yet, when she spoke to the customers, her voice was warm, her smile genuine. Something about her pulled me in, an unfamiliar feeling tightening in my chest. When she turned and met my gaze, I expected pity. Instead, there was curiosity. "Hey there," she greeted with a small smile. "Looking for a table?" I nodded, keeping my voice measured. "If you have one." She glanced around the packed diner, then bit her lip. "Give me a sec." To my surprise, she walked to a booth occupied by two men sipping coffee. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she said politely. "Would you mind moving to the counter? We have a guest who needs a table with space for his wheelchair." I expected them to ignore her, or worse, react poorly. But something about the quiet authority in her voice made them comply without argument. She returned moments later, pulling the chair away to make room. "Here you go," she said, smiling. "Let me know if you need anything else." I nodded, impressed. Most people either ignored or infantilized me when they saw the wheelchair. But she treated me like anyone else. I was here to test her kindness. Instead, I found myself wanting to know more about her. She returned with a menu, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "What's your name?" I hesitated, then said, "Damien." She smiled. "Nice to meet you, Damien." "I'm Olivia." The name suited her. It was warm, like the way she carried herself. "Do you need help with the menu?" she asked, not assuming but offering. I shook my head. "I can manage." She nodded, seemingly content to leave me be. But before she could walk away, I asked, "Have you worked here long?" A shadow passed over her face before she forced a smile. "A couple of years. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills." There was something in her tone, a quiet sadness she tried to hide. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I wanted to know why. I returned to the diner every day that week. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Each time, Olivia greeted me with that same warm smile, the kind that reached her eyes despite the exhaustion that clung to her. She never pried, never asked about my disability. She simply treated me as Damien, the man in the wheelchair, not the billionaire CEO. And the more I spoke to her, the harder it became to remember that this was supposed to be a test. I wasn't studying her anymore. I was falling for her. One night, as the diner emptied, I watched Olivia counting tips with a weary sigh. The bills were few, crumpled, and barely enough to cover a meal, let alone rent. I wanted to help her, but I couldn't, not without revealing who I truly was. So instead I asked, "You look tired." "Long shift." She let out a dry chuckle. "Every shift is long when you're a single mom." I stiffened. "You have a kid?" Her eyes softened. "Yeah, a little girl. She's my world." A lump formed in my throat. She was struggling, really struggling, and I had all the resources to change her life in an instant. But would she still trust me if she knew the truth? Days passed, and I became more entangled in Olivia's life than I ever intended. I watched how she cared for customers, how she worked tirelessly for a daughter she adored. I wanted to tell her everything, but I didn't, because I wasn't ready to face what came next. One evening, as I was leaving the diner, I saw Olivia talking to a man in a suit. His voice was cold, his posture rigid. "You're 3 months behind, Olivia," he said. "If you can't pay by the end of the week, you're out." Panic flickered in her eyes, but she masked it quickly. "Please," she whispered. "I just need more time." The man scoffed. "Time doesn't pay the rent." I clenched my fists, barely restraining myself. I could fix this. I could pay her rent, wipe her struggles away with a single check. But would she accept my help? Or would she hate me for keeping the truth from her? The next day, I made a decision. I waited until her shift ended, then met her outside. "Olivia," I said carefully, "what if I told you there was a way out of all this?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" I took a breath, knowing this would change everything. "What if I told you I wasn't who you thought I was?" Her eyes narrowed, suspicion creeping into her expression. "What do you mean, Damien?" I hesitated. This was it, the moment of truth. But before I could speak, she shook her head. "Never mind. I don't have time for riddles. I have a daughter to take care of." She turned to leave, and panic surged through me. "Wait," I said, rolling forward. "Let me help you." She stopped but didn't turn around. "Help me how?" I have resources." My words felt clumsy, inadequate. "I can cover your rent. Make sure you and your daughter are safe." Finally, she faced me. Her eyes were wary, guarded. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because I'm in love with you." I swallowed the words before they could escape. "Because you deserve better." For a moment, she just stared at me, and I thought she might actually consider it. Then she took a step back. "I don't take charity." Frustration coiled in my chest. "It's not charity. An investment." "In what?" "In you." But she didn't trust me, and she had no reason to. The next day, I made a choice that would change everything. I paid off her rent. I thought she'd be relieved, grateful. Instead, she stormed into the diner, her face flushed with fury. "You did what?" she hissed, slamming a piece of paper onto the counter. It was a receipt, proof that her landlord had been paid in full. I held her gaze, refusing to back down. "You needed help. I needed to figure it out on my own." Anger flashed in her eyes, but beneath it, I saw something worse. Betrayal. "You lied to me," she whispered. "You're not just some guy in a wheelchair, are you?" My stomach twisted. "No," I admitted. "I'm not." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. "Who are you?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I exhaled slowly. "My name is Damien Cole. I own Cole Industries." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "The Billionaire CEO?" she asked, disbelief lacing her words. I nodded, waiting for the fallout. She let out a hollow laugh. "Unbelievable. I thought you were different. Olivia, please. Was this some kind of experiment?" Her voice cracked. "Were you testing me? Seeing if the poor single mom was worthy of your help?" Shame burned through me, because yes, that's how it started. But now it was so much more. "I never meant to hurt you," I said, my voice raw. She shook her head. "You lied to me every single day." She turned to leave, but I reached for her wrist. "Please," I begged. "Give me a chance to explain." She yanked her hand away. "There's nothing left to explain." And then she was gone. And for the first time in my life, I knew what true regret felt like. The emptiness she left behind was unbearable. The moment Olivia walked out of that diner, it felt like she had taken the air with her. I sat there for hours, staring at the door, hoping she would walk back in. But she didn't. I had lost her, and it was my own fault. The next morning, I found myself at my office, staring at the city skyline from the top floor of Cole Industries. The power, the wealth, the empire I had built. None of it meant a damn thing without her. "You don't look good, boss." I turned to see Nathan, my closest confidant and head of security, standing in the doorway. He had seen me negotiate billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. Now I looked like a wreck. "I messed up, Nathan," I admitted, rubbing a hand over my face. "You mean the girl from the diner?" I nodded, and he let out a sigh. "Look, man, if she's worth it, you better fight for her. Women like that don't come around often." I already knew that. The problem was, I didn't know if I even deserved a second chance. I avoided the diner for days. I told myself it was to give her space. But the truth was, I couldn't bear to see the hatred in her eyes again. Instead, I sent a private investigator to make sure she and her daughter were okay. He reported that she was still working at the diner, still struggling to make ends meet. I hated that I had become just another man who had let her down. But I didn't know how to fix it, so I did nothing. And that, more than anything, made me feel like a coward. One evening, I found myself parked outside her apartment building. The lights were on in her small unit, and I could just make out her silhouette through the curtains. She was holding her daughter, rocking her gently. I clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. She didn't know I was out here. She didn't know how much I wanted to walk. No, we'll my way up those steps and tell her the truth, that I never meant to hurt her, that I was falling for her long before I even realized it myself. But I couldn't, because she deserved more than words. She deserved proof, and I had no idea how to give her that. I hadn't expected to hear from her again, but fate had other plans. It was past midnight when my phone buzzed, dragging me from a restless sleep. I groggily reached for it, my heart skipping a beat when I saw the name. Olivia. I sat up instantly, swiping to answer. Olivia? There was silence for a moment, then a trembling voice. Damien, I need your help. My pulse spiked. What's wrong? It's my daughter. She's sick, and the hospital won't treat her without insurance. Her voice cracked. I didn't wait for her to finish. I'm on my way. I arrived at the hospital within minutes, the tires of my car screeching to a halt in the emergency lot. I didn't care about the stairs as I rolled through the entrance, searching desperately for her. And then I saw her. She was sitting beside a small hospital bed, clutching her daughter's tiny hand. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. The second she saw me, her lip trembled. I didn't know who else to call, she whispered. I reached for her hand, ignoring the way she flinched at first. You did the right thing. And then, without hesitation, I called in every favor I had. I was a billionaire, damn it. If my money couldn't save the woman I loved, then what the hell was it good for? I had never been so relentless in my life. I stormed through that hospital like I owned the damn place, demanding the best doctors, the best treatment. I paid for specialists to be flown in overnight, made sure her daughter got the care she deserved. Olivia watched it all unfold, her expression unreadable. Why are you doing this? She finally asked. I met her gaze, my throat tightening. Because you matter to me, I said simply. She didn't say anything, but for the first time in weeks, she didn't push me away. The hours crawled by. The doctors ran tests, monitored Olivia's daughter, and assured us she would be okay. I stayed by Olivia's side the entire time. At one point, she fell asleep in the chair next to me, exhaustion finally claiming her. And I just sat there, watching her, wondering how the hell I had let myself fall this deep. I had started this whole thing as a test. But now Olivia was the only thing that felt real in my life. And I wasn't going to lose her again. The doctors finally gave us the news. Her daughter would recover. Olivia let out a breathless sob, covering her face with her hands. Relief crashed over her, and before she could stop herself, she turned to me and threw her arms around my neck. For a second, I froze. Then, slowly, I wrapped my arms around her, holding her as tightly as I dared. Thank you, she whispered against my shoulder. I closed my eyes. I would have given her the world if she asked for it. But for now, this was enough. Olivia didn't forgive me immediately. Trust wasn't something I could buy. It was something I had to rebuild. So I did. Day by day, I showed up. I helped her with her daughter, supported her without overwhelming her, proved to her that I wasn't just some billionaire looking to play games with people's lives. She still hesitated around me, still struggled to let me in. But I was patient, because she was worth it. It happened one evening, after I had taken them both out for dinner. We were sitting in my car, parked outside her apartment. Her daughter was asleep in the back seat, and Olivia was staring at me with an unreadable expression. I was so angry at you, she admitted, but I can't ignore what you've done for us. My heart pounded. I didn't do it to earn your forgiveness. Then why? She whispered. I swallowed hard. Because I love you. Her breath hitched. For a moment, I thought she would leave again. But instead, she reached for my hand. And finally, after everything, she didn't pull away. The silence between us stretched as Olivia's fingers rested lightly against mine. She could have pulled away, she had every reason to. But she didn't. She sighed, her shoulders sagging as if she was too exhausted to fight anymore. I don't know if I can trust you, Damien, she admitted softly. I know, I said, tightening my grip slightly. But I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you can. She studied me, as if searching for cracks in my sincerity. You lied to me, she whispered, her voice heavy with pain. I did, I admitted without hesitation. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I never lied about how I feel about you. That was real. That is real. Her lip trembled, but she didn't look away. You make it sound so simple. It is, I said quietly. Loving you has been the simplest thing I've ever done. Her breath caught, and for the first time, I saw something other than hurt in her eyes. Hope. The silence between us stretched as Olivia's fingers rested lightly against mine. She could have pulled away, she had every reason to. But she didn't. She sighed, her shoulders sagging as if she was too exhausted to fight anymore. I don't know if I can trust you, Damien, she admitted softly. I know, I said, tightening my grip slightly. But I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you can. She studied me, as if searching for cracks in my sincerity. You lied to me, she whispered, her voice heavy with pain. I did, I admitted without hesitation. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I never lied about how I feel about you. That was real. That is real. Her lip trembled, but she didn't look away. You make it sound so simple. It is, I said quietly. Loving you has been the simplest thing I've ever done. Her breath caught, and for the first time, I saw something other than hurt in her eyes. Hope. Olivia wasn't someone who gave her heart away easily. She had been burned before by life, by men who had made empty promises, by a world that had never given her a fair chance. So even as she started letting me in, I knew she was afraid. Afraid of what I represented. Afraid of what it would mean to truly trust me. One evening, as I helped her put her daughter to bed, I saw it, the hesitation in her eyes as I tucked a blanket around the little girl. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. Do what? I asked, turning to face her. Play house. Pretend you care. You don't owe us anything, Damien. I frowned, standing up. You think this is pretend? She swallowed hard. I don't know what to think anymore. I took a step closer, forcing her to meet my gaze. Then let me show you. And just like that, I vowed to break down every wall she had left. Just when I thought we were making progress, life threw another punch. I was at my office when Nathan walked in, his expression grim. You need to see this, he said, dropping a folder onto my desk. I opened it and my stomach dropped. Olivia's ex was back in town, and he was looking for her. I barely made it to the diner before Olivia's ex arrived. He was waiting outside, leaning against a rusted-out car, a smirk on his face. Well, he sneered when I rolled up beside Olivia. Looks like you upgraded, huh? Olivia's hand tightened around mine. What do you want, Adam? He shrugged. Heard you were doing well for yourself. Thought maybe you could spare some cash for an old friend. You're not my friend, she spat. His eyes darkened. Come on, live. Don't be like that. I had seen enough. Leave, I said, my voice deadly calm. He smirked at me. And who the hell are you? The man who will ruin you if you so much as look at her the wrong way. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He looked at Olivia once more. This isn't over, but it was, because I would make damn sure of it. After Adam left, Olivia was shaking. I reached for her, but she stepped back. Why do you keep saving me? She whispered. I don't need a knight in shining armor. Damien, I know you don't, I said gently. But that doesn't mean you have to do everything alone. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I don't know how to let someone in. I cupped her face, brushing my thumb along her cheek. Then let me teach you. And for the first time, she let herself lean into me. It wasn't a grand declaration or a dramatic moment. It was quiet, subtle. One evening, Olivia reached for my hand without hesitation. Another night, she rested her head against my shoulder as we watched her daughter sleep. Little by little, she let herself trust me. Little by little, I became part of her life. Until one night, she finally whispered, I love you too, and just like that, everything changed. Loving Olivia wasn't about saving her. It was about standing beside her. And when I finally proposed, it wasn't in some grand, extravagant way. It was just us, sitting in her tiny apartment, her daughter asleep in the next room. I pulled a small box from my pocket and held it out. "I don't want to change your life, Olivia. I just want to be in it." She looked down at the ring, then back at me, tears pooling in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, and just like that, my life truly began. We didn't move into a mansion. We didn't become some billionaire fairy tale. We stayed in her little apartment for a while. I still went to the diner every morning, still watched her work, still loved her for everything she was. When we finally moved, it wasn't to some palace, it was just a home. A place where her daughter could grow up safe. A place where Olivia could finally breathe. A place where I could finally be happy. Because money had never been what I was missing. It was her. And for the first time in my life, I knew I had everything I would ever need.